Well, hello, this is your instructor, Russ, and I'm glad to have you with you. Glad to be with you again for this week. And this week, we're really focusing on persuasive speaking. So we'll get into that in just a minute and talk about different aspects of persuasive speaking, especially from chapters 14 and 15 of your textbook. But I want to first start by going over the assignments that are due by the end of this week. All of these are due by no later than Sunday night by midnight to get these in. You have a quiz that is due for this week, and that's over chapters 14 and 15. So read those chapters over, and that'll be a big help for your quiz. Then you have a discussion post, and it's important that you read my announcement that I have for this week about that discussion post. It's about three types of persuasive speeches that you could write. Writing questions of fact, questions of value, questions of policy. And so you need to read that over so you can understand how to do that assignment. It's in two parts. The first part is you write three questions. The second part is you take those questions and make them into statements and write those down. Remember that you do need to reply to at least two classmates' posts, and that's due the Tuesday following this Sunday, and that's also due by midnight. Then you have an assignment that's due, and this is to create some statements that are the examples of faulty reasoning. And to help you with that, you need to look over the pages that I list in the announcement that will give you definitions and examples from the textbook. For each one, I think there's 8 different terms, faulty reasoning terms that you need to include in your examples. So anyway, let's jump into our persuasive speaking lecture, and I'm going to share my screen with you at this time. So you should be seeing my screen now, and you should be seeing that we start off with talking about the definition of public speaking. We'll start off the slideshow here. And the definition here of public speaking is to either change or to reinforce a person's viewpoint on a topic. So you can see here that you can either be speaking to a group that's against you, opposed to you, that's changing their viewpoint, or reinforcing their viewpoint. That is when an audience, a person agrees with you. So either one is a persuasive speech. And what you're trying to do is either change or reinforce the viewpoint that they have for you. We see this example in politics. People try to get you to vote for a candidate or to vote for a topic, for a subject. And they'll try to do that by either, if you're opposed to the candidate, to show you how their candidate's better than the other candidate, or they might show you how the other candidate is worse than theirs is. We also see this true in advertising, persuasive speaking, to try to convince you to buy a product, change your point of view on if you're going to go buy a certain cereal, to buy their brand of cereal that they want, or toothpaste, or whatever product it is that they're selling. And we also see this used in relationships between people, individually, between couples, between friends, say teammates, a coach trying to give a pep talk to his team, instructing them on what to do is a persuasive speech given to a friendly, to a positive audience that agrees with them. The next thing we want to talk about is the different kinds of audiences you can have. You have 3 basic kinds of audiences. One of those is called a friendly audience. This friendly audience is one that basically agrees with you. Now, you need to find out as a speaker, to what extent do they agree? Do they wholeheartedly agree? Do they somewhat agree? Do they agree only in certain circumstances or situations? So that's called a friendly audience. Another one is a hostile audience, which is on the other side of the spectrum. And this means an audience that is opposed to you. They disagree with you. And again, we don't know to what degree they disagree, but we just know they somewhat or totally disagree with you. The third kind of audience is called the neutral audience. And this is one that perhaps sometimes is for you, sometimes against you. Perhaps they don't know enough about the topic that you're talking about, the issue, to have a viewpoint on it, either for or against you. Or perhaps they just really don't care. This is not on the top of their priority list, And so they haven't spent much time or energy talking about it. All of those kinds of people are called a neutral audience, in between friendly and hostile. Then we have what I call levels of understanding when you're trying to persuade someone. There's different levels starting from the level of knowledge. How much does a person or an audience know about your subject, your topic? You need to know that as a speaker, because if they don't know very much at all, then you need to give them information, knowledge, so that'll help them to make a educated decision on whether they agree with you or disagree with you. Perhaps they are on the level of belief. They know enough about the topic, but perhaps their belief system is different than yours. And so, is this knowledge they have? Do they believe that you are true or false? Yes or no, right or wrong? Those are belief type of statements. And you need to know, what does the audience believe about your topic? Do they agree with you or not? What's their attitude toward the topic? And then thirdly is the value. How important is this topic to you and then to the audience? Do they have the same value as you do? Is their priority exactly the same? You need to know that as well. And then their behavior is the fourth one. What do they actually do in regards to this issue? So let's say that the issue is recycling. And you need to know, as a speaker, how much does the audience know about recycling, about what it is, the value, the importance of recycling? How do they, the knowledge or information that they know about what is accepted as recycling and what isn't? Perhaps they only think of recycling as far as what you can set out on the curb in a big, 90-gallon container to be recycled, like paper and plastic primarily. But did you know that you could also recycle clothing? And that's something different that you could do. And so perhaps to increase their knowledge is something you need to do with recycling. What about their belief? Do they believe that recycling is something we should do? Yes or no? Is it right or is it wrong to recycle? Now, I know very few people, if any, that would say it's wrong to recycle or it's a bad thing to recycle. I think most people would say they believe it's a good thing. Now, the next question then would be their value. How important is recycling to them? And sometimes this is shown in their behavior. Do they actually recycle? Do they have a recycling system? Do they have a bin for recycling, a way to recycle? How do they do things? So these are all questions that you need to ask yourself, or you need to actually ask of your audience prior to writing your speech. This is going to be very important to help you know. So in preparing for your persuasive speech, to know, first of all, the kind of audience that you have. Secondly, to know where is their level of understanding. Is their level just on the knowledge level because they don't know very much, if at all, anything about your topic? Then you're going to be pretty much stuck there on that level. But if they do know something or a lot about your topic, you go to the next level of belief. After you examine that, go to the next level of value. And then finally, what is the behavior of your audience? Aristotle, who is a Greek philosopher, came up with some persuasive motivators, and we want to use all three of these in our speech that we present. The first one that's the most persuasive is called ethos. This simply means credibility, believability. How trustworthy is the speaker? Can we trust what you're saying is true? Now, believe it or not, the more you cite other sources in your speech, the more you verbally say things like, according to this other person, according to this article in a website or something, the more you do that, the more your ethos goes up. The less you do that, the more your ethos goes down. In other words, you're more believable when you cite some research that you've done and not just stating this is my own opinion on something. Your opinion is fine, but it's not really any stronger or weaker than anybody else's opinion. It's it's kind of like faces. All of us have one. We all have a face. They're all different, but we all have one. And ethos is the same way. We need to present ourselves in a way that we look credible, that we sound credible, and so that people can believe in us and believe in what we say. So that's the most important persuasive motivator. Second one is logos. This is almost as persuasive as ethos, but not quite. And logos is really two things. It's the use of supporting evidence, supporting information, such as facts, examples, statistics, testimony, which is either a direct quote or a paraphrase. That's one use of logos, is supporting evidence. And another one is your use of reasoning, of how you can reason things out. If, for example, here's deductive reasoning. If I know then observe that the sun has risen in the east for the last 3 days in a row, then I can make a prediction that the sun will rise in the east the next day. That is the use of deductive reasoning, or logos, as Aristotle would call it. So whenever you use things that you've researched and you cite certain testimony, facts, examples, any statistic, that's the use of logos. Those are very persuasive, as well as you, the speaker, having a lot of believability. Combine those two together, and it's a really, really powerful, persuasive motivator for people when you use positive ethos and you have lots of good logos. But there's a third motivator, and that's called pathos. Pathos is the use of emotion, and this is used in lots of different ways. For example, pathos could be the emotion of patriotism. You see a person waving a flag and speaking of the American way. That's their use of emotion or pathos. And whenever you hear music in the background of something on television or a movie, that's the use of pathos to create an emotional setting for the situation. Now, pathos is the weakest of the motivators, but still very important. Many speakers use, for example, stories in their speeches to have an emotional punch, especially in the introduction and the conclusion of the speech, are great places to use pathos. Use ethos all the way through the speech, use logos in the body of the speech, pathos for the introduction and conclusion, and you've got a very, very powerful, persuasive speech. The next thing that I want to talk about is how to organize your persuasive speech. And there's usually different methods that people use to organize. And by this, I'm talking about your main points. Every speech should have an introduction and should have a conclusion. The introduction should have an attention getter, should have a central idea. It should have a relation of the topic to the speaker, a relation of the topic to the audience. It should have a preview, possibly, of the main points. All conclusions should have a signal that you're ending, like saying in conclusion, to sum up. All conclusions should have a restatement of the main points that you talked about. And then you should end up a persuasive speech with your final plea, what you're asking the audience, what you want them to do, what you want them to think about. But here in organizing, I'm talking about the main points of your speech. And here's all the different ways that you can do this. You can have a problem solution, which is a two main point persuasive speech. First main point is going in depth in describing and talking about the problem, and then talking about the solution. Notice here that the solution is just singular. It's not plural. And so you're only going to talk about one solution, the best solution, not multiple ones. You could do that in an informative speech, talk about multiple solutions, but not in a persuasive speech. A second choice you have is to talk about the problem, the second main point being the causes of the problem, and then the third main point being your solution. You could then also talk about, which is sometimes called the motivated sequence or order of organization, the problem, the solution, and then the benefits or the advantages to adopting this solution. If you want to use the motivated sequence, I have in the announcements for this week a lot more details about how to actually put that into practice. This one is a great one if you have a definite solution in mind, some behavior you want to have the audience to do, something to do like to sign a petition, buy a product, something like that. Motivated sequence would be a great organization to use. If you don't have a solution, you could use the last one. You could describe the problem, explain why we have the problem, where it came from, the causes of it, and then the effects. Either the positive effects of if we make a change, if we come up with a solution, how things could change for the positive, or you could talk about the negative effects. If we don't come up with a solution, here's the negative things that will continue to happen as a result of this. So these are your ways that you can organize your speech. At this point, we're going to stop the sharing at this point to end up this video. And please review this if you need to. Look at the announcements that I have for this week. And of course, read through chapters 14 and 15, and they'll help you quite a bit with preparing for your persuasive speech that is due for next week. So until we talk again, this is your instructor, Russ, saying so long, and I'm so glad that we had this time together.